They tried to hit a U.S. carrier. The Navy's response was brutal. If you ever wondered what happens when someone decides very badly to pick a fight with a U.S. Navy carrier, let me save you the suspense. Bad choices, rapid math, and a lot of very loud machinery. This little tale starts on January 6th, 2025, somewhere in the busy, briny middle of the Red Sea, where the deck of a U.S. carrier and the skin of its sailors were about to teach a few lessons that could not be unlearned. Picture the carrier. Big, humming, impossibly complex, doing what carriers do. Planes cycling to the runway, crews moving with a kind of practiced choreography, and the rest of the battle group keeping a careful, invisible watch. The guided missile destroyer nearby, a vigilant neighbor with a nose for trouble, was doing the same. Suddenly, the quiet math the ship's radars usually ran for routine traffic added a terrifying new variable. Fast-moving blips where there should have been none. The destroyer's sensors didn't hesitate. In seconds, the ship's combat system ran through millions of calculations, industry shorthand for an orchestra of electronics, and arrived at one brutal conclusion: inbound missiles. That was the kind of moment naval sailors train for, but never hope to meet in real life. General quarters, battle stations, are not meant to be leisurely. Men and women sprinted to positions while alarms braided the night with urgency. The crew alerted the carrier, which immediately powered up engines that had been idle. 90 seconds later, the destroyer would be sprinting at top speed. But in missile timelines, 90 seconds is an eternity. When you're juggling objects that fly faster than your words, fractions of a minute decide whether you get to finish your coffee. Electronic warfare teams and signal analysts leaned into their consoles. The inbound signatures weren't random. They matched a familiar name in the prickly world of anti-ship weapons. A subsonic cruise missile designed to be cheap, nasty, and stubborn. It preferred to skim the water like an unhappy pebble, hugging the sea to try and slip under radar soup. This kind of missile is built to be survivable, not flashy, with a warhead meant to punch through ship skin and make an already bad day much worse. This is where the ship's standard missiles, the bread-and-butter defenders of naval airspace, enter the story. The ship launched a pair of SM-2 variants suited for the moment, older, reliable blocks that do the job against low and slow threats without exhausting the fleet's most modern inventory. The idea is simple. Don't use a gold bar to swat a fly. Still, even a tried-and-true interceptor has to find a target in a sky full of mirrors and sea clutter, and the first salvo cut the incoming corridor into confetti. Radar then watched the aftermath closely. A debris field bloomed on the water. Twisted metal, fuel slicks, and the odd stubborn chunk that bobbed like bad news. Once any uncertainty remained, the destroyer delivered the courtesy of a double tap just to be sure. By the time the radar operators stopped marking tracks, the immediate missile threat had been resolved, and everyone allowed themselves a breath that was at least one heartbeat longer than before. Hours later, new contacts appeared, smaller, slower, and closer to the idea of a drone than a conventional missile. These unmanned munitions travel at a modest pace, carrying warheads that, while not large enough to sink a carrier, are perfectly capable of making life very unpleasant for the people aboard. The captain had decisions to make. Missiles are expensive and limited. Drones are cheap and numerous. Wasting million-dollar interceptors on $5,000 munitions is a trap. Instead, the ship elected to engage in a more measured fashion, decking the approach with close-in defenses that are literally designed to lay down a wall of lead. The close-in weapon system, think of it as the ship's last reliable dog, spits out thousands of rounds a minute and makes any metal thing that keeps flying suddenly less aerodynamic. At 3 miles out, the CIWS spun up, locks developed, and then, in rapid succession, it choreographed the destruction of the inbound drones. The shells chew aerodynamic surfaces, shred propellers and guidance, and leave the attackers as floating wreckage. These weapons are the Navy's answer to the age-old problem: how to stop something that wants to hit you without a lot of time to negotiate. After the smoke cleared and the radar showed no more tracks, the carrier was still intact, planes were still flying, and sailors could, briefly, allow a grin that was equal parts relief and disbelief. You might expect the attackers to slink away after such a clear failure. They did not. The adversary claimed hits in public messaging, a reminder that wartime narratives are often as useful as actual ordnance. For the sailors on deck, the cameras recorded takeoffs and landings, and the ship's log recorded nothing that matched the boastful footage. In kinetic terms, the carrier remained unscathed. But war isn't only decided on the surface of the water. Far from ships and sailors, analysts on shore and in orbit use a different toolkit, satellites that see heat where the naked eye sees only dunes. Thermal imaging can reveal subterranean activity in a landscape that otherwise looks like a random scatter of rock and sand. When a patch of desert, usually cold at night, shows a stubbornly warm footprint, that warmth has a story to tell. Activity, engines, or recently disturbed Earth. Those thermal signatures don't stand alone. Airborne assets like persistent drones and specially equipped reconnaissance planes then go to work, lining photos, signals, and geolocated chatter into a single corroborated picture. A Reaper might loiter and photograph. A signals intelligence plane might listen to emissions and triangulate a source. Together, they provide the kind of confirmation that heat maps alone cannot. Names, comms patterns, and infrastructure that fits the description of an arms cache. Once analysts had a tight fix on likely storage sites, underground bunkers, and tunnel networks that looked conspicuously engineered. At the appointed hour, a symphony began. Tomahawks, long-legged, GPS and terrain-following cruise missiles, rose from ship magazines and slanted toward inland waypoints. They are patient missiles, built to follow the shape of the Earth rather than a reckless straight line. Tomahawks use terrain contour matching and digital scene correlation systems to make sure they know where they are and where they're going. For a moment, you can imagine the Tomahawk as a slow, stubborn librarian with a map. It looks for familiar chapters in the landscape and keeps comparing what it sees with what it expects. Minutes before the finishing hits, strike aircraft streaked in to add local effects and precision. Those fighter bombers carry targeting pods, sensors that paint targets with laser designators and guide bombs into precisely the places the planners once softened. The result was 2 deep craters where there had been hardened storage, and a ripple of secondary detonations as stored munitions reacted to being woken up by nearby explosions. Secondary detonations are messy and loud. They hammer home the point that weapon storage is a dangerous business, whether you run it or blow it up. Analysts counted craters and secondary blasts. They cataloged the materials left behind. They measured the effect the operation had on the adversary's ability to launch more attacks. In this case, the strike put a tangible dent in that capability for weeks, if not months. But warfare tends to be a long conversation rather than a one-sentence answer. You might wonder about the human cost in these stories. Often, we do not get precise numbers, because counting combatants in messy theaters is a difficult and sometimes intentionally obfuscated task. The narrative we can report cleanly is tactical. The weapons caches were degraded and 2 clear target sites were neutralized. Operationally, the moment sent a message. Attacking a carrier and expecting impunity is a bet with very poor odds. From a technological standard, this whole episode is best read as a clash of sensors, guidance algorithms, and weapons layered to do very specific jobs. On the attack side, you have relatively low cost, designed to be hard to detect weapons that trade sophistication for expendability, think sea-skimming anti-ship cruise missiles and small loitering or strike drones. And on the defense side, you have layered systems built to detect, discriminate, and then respond at increasing levels of force. Below are a few short paragraphs that describe the main pieces used in your story, written plainly and lightly, technical. No step-by-step how-to, just what these things are and why they matter. First, the anti-ship cruise missile family, the C-802/YJ-83 style. These are subsonic, jet-powered missiles designed to fly low over the sea to reduce radar exposure, carry a heavy armor-piercing or fragmentation warhead, and find ships using a mix of inertial navigation and active terminal radar seekers. Their strength is persistence and surprise. They're not blisteringly fast, but sea skimming and terminal guidance make them dangerous in mass or when launched from nearby platforms. Second, the Defender's long-range layer, the Standard Missile Family, SM-2 as used in many Aegis-equipped ships. These are supersonic surface-to-air interceptors whose job is to climb and meet incoming cruise missiles or aircraft well before they reach the ship. Different blocks, older versus newer, trade cost, seeker sophistication, and countermeasure ability. Tactically, you choose the variant that balances availability and capability for the specific threat. In short, SM-2s are the fleet's reliable mid to long-range answer. Third, The close-in final layer, the phalanx or similar CIWS. When something slips through at close range, fast, slow, or small, CIWS is the last-ditch rapid-fire gun system that lays a literal curtain of 20mm projectiles to break apart or deflect an inbound drone or missile. Modern blocks can fire thousands of rounds per minute and are engineered to acquire, track, and engage threats in fractions of a second. Not pretty, but brutally effective when it's needed. Fourth, long-reach precision options. Tomahawk cruise missiles and strike aircraft with targeting pods. Tomahawks combine inertial/GPS navigation with terrain contour matching and digital scene correlation so they can navigate long distances and still find small, hardened targets with high confidence. That's why planners use them for deep, precise strikes. Strike aircraft use electro-optical/laser designator pods to paint targets for guided bombs, tying the long-range effects and close precision together. These tools are how a fleet can move from purely defensive action into targeted surgical follow-through. Finally, the sensors and ISR links that make choice possible. Satellites, thermal imagers, persistent uncrewed systems like the MQ-9 Reaper, and SIGINT platforms, such as the RC-135 rivet joint. Thermal and multispectral satellite imagery can highlight anomalous heat signatures, bunker entrances, recent activity in featureless terrain. MQ-9s offer long-dwell visual/IR and synthetic aperture radar imagery, plus the option to strike. RC-135s and similar aircraft collect signals to tie chatter and emissions to locations. Those inputs, fused together, turn a blurry suspicion into actionable targeting data.